Hello, it's Zachary Holsworth here making a second video for my master's program. My master's degree is going to be in community organizing and social justice. And we were tasked with making a video or a podcast about some particular aspect of injustice. So for the past several weeks I've been thinking, well, what video should I make? And I was thinking of maybe doing transportation justice, food justice, and I was going back and forth in between, and I came to realize that we can't really talk about one particular type of injustice without talking about another, because all types of injustice intersect, and they're all linked. So what I'm going to try to do is show you how transportation justice is linked to other forms of injustices. But before I do that, I want to remind you, and I guess this is the thing you're supposed to do on YouTube, is to welcome you to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and then click on the little bell, which gives you notifications for when I'll upload a video. So getting back to it, what is transportation justice? I'm going to read a definition that I have here. So transportation justice is the right of every person to a safe, accessible, affordable, and healthy transportation system in their communities. And this is a definition from the Environmental Health Coalition. The Environmental Health Coalition works primarily in the San Diego area and in Tijuana, but also throughout the state of California. And they tend to focus on environmental justice issues and any kind of thing that intersects with environmental justice. So now that we know what transit justice is, why is it important? Well, according to Urban Habitat, a strong public transportation system is linked to having access to education, jobs, and healthcare. I guess my first encounter with transportation justice issues came a while back, before I even heard of transportation justice or transit justice, when I was watching an episode of the Dr. Phil show, and the guest on the show was like a girl who had graduated from college and wasn't really doing anything, and her parents were all upset at her, and so they sent her to Dr. Phil to, get her right. And she told Dr. Phil one reason she can't get a job is because she has a lot of student loans, she's in debt, and she doesn't have a car. And in the area she's in, there's not much transportation. And Dr. Phil said to her, well, what do you mean? You have to work to get a car. Take a bus. Find a job and take the bus. And the comment was and the audience, of course, applauded, but this comment is kind of very ignorant, very bourgeois, very stupid. How is she supposed to get to a job when perhaps the area she's living in, she doesn't actually have a reliable transportation system? So it's kind of a paradox, right? In order to get a job, you need transportation. But in order to pay for some kind of transportation, you actually need money, and you get money from working for a job. So this makes it very difficult, for some people who are living in an area where there may not be the best public transportation. They can't afford a car. Well, how are they supposed to get access to the certain jobs? Sometimes, you might have to switch buses 4, 5, 6 times just to get to your job, and that's not really practical. So we have to find ways to develop better systems where transportation could become more reliable. Uh, Another thing we want to talk about is the link between transportation, justice, and food deserts. So, according to Tulane University, the Tulane University School of Social Work, and the organization called Teaching Tolerance, they claim that 2.3 million Americans, which is 2.2% of the total U.S. population, live in an area that's 1 or more miles away from a grocery store, and that these 2.3 million people do not have access to, they don't own their own car, and they don't really have a reliable access to a vehicle or public transportation. So they're a mile or more away from a grocery store. How are they supposed to get food? How are they supposed to be healthy? So there's a linkage here. And then, according to DoSomething.org, we have 23.5 million people who live in food deserts. So again, a food desert is essentially defined as an area where there's not a grocery store that has fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, fresh meat, things that you need in order to keep yourself healthy. So 23.5 million people, that's a large percentage of the U.S. population. Now, while I don't have the exact statistic on this, we can assume that most of these people don't live in food deserts because they don't have access to reliable transportation, and of course this affects their health. And this takes us into health justice. And the last linkage I want to try to make between transportation justice and and is with health justice. So the area I'm living in is the Rio Grande Valley, and because we are close of Texas, so because we're really close to the border, there's a high percentage of undocumented people, and what there's a lack of here in the Rio Grande Valley is certain medical specialists, certain medical experts. So what people have to do is they have to drive to San Antonio, they have to drive to Houston, they have to drive to Dallas. Well, now in order to get to those other cities, in order to leave the Rio Grande Valley, you have to stop in a town called Falfurrias. In Falfurrias, the Border Patrol has a checkpoint, right? So if you're undocumented, you're deprived of the freedom of movement, right? You can't get past this checkpoint. And so how are you supposed to see these certain medical specialists you might need to see? So when we think of transit justice, we can only limit it to the definition that the Environmental Health Coalition gave us, which was the right of every person to a safe, affordable, accessible, and healthy transportation system. We also have to think of transit justice as the freedom of movement, which is something that, at least in the state of Texas, undocumented people seem not to have. They can't get out of if they're living in the valley, it's very difficult for them to get out of the valley, and that affects health outcomes. So I hope from the video you're able to see that for different forms of injustice are linked together, and we can't separate them. We can't talk about solving one type of injustice without talking about another type of injustices, because all types of injustices are linked, so we have to tackle multiple issues at the same time in order to achieve justice and equity.